Listen to the echo inside the Federal Auction House in South Florida, November 2012. The sharp smack of a wooden gavel cuts through the humid air. Court-appointed liquidators read numbers off a clipboard. The lens of the local news camera pans across a grim concrete storage facility. It bypasses the forfeited luxury vehicles and the seized properties, focusing directly on a towering, chaotic mountain of cardboard. 240 sealed boxes of premium Nike sneakers sit stacked against a bare wall, gathering fine layers of industrial dust. "We are auctioning his Super Bowl ring," a bankruptcy trustee announced to a room of eager bargain hunters. But look at the shoes. He kept the shoes. Sports television networks broadcasted this footage on a repeating loop. Commentators laughed over the B-roll. They framed former Defensive Player of the Year Warren Sapp as a wealthy caricature. They painted him as a giant who blew through millions to satisfy a blind, reckless shopping addiction. That broadcasting narrative provides a comfortable fiction. The humid storage facility does not contain the remnants of a high-end shopping spree. It holds the physical wreckage of a psychological collapse. The giant standing in the courtroom did not burn his fortune out of mere vanity. He drained his accounts attempting to construct a cardboard fortress against a ghost. To understand the cardboard boxes, observers must travel miles away from the bright lights of professional stadiums. They must walk the cracked, sun-baked dirt roads of Plymouth, Florida. This is where the giant was formed. Poverty in rural Florida operates as a permanent atmospheric condition, far beyond a temporary financial setback. It dictates the coarse texture of the hand-me-down clothes you wear. It controls the gnawing, acidic sensation in your stomach right before sleep. A boy growing up in Plymouth learns early that daily survival requires hyper-vigilance. The luxury of an innocent childhood simply does not exist. Warren Sapp possessed a singular exit ticket. He carried raw, explosive physical power. Football scouts identified his potential. Universities offered athletic scholarships. The National Football League drafted him in the first round, handing him a multi-million-dollar signing bonus. He achieved the quintessential American dream. He stepped out of the dirt and walked directly onto the marble floors of high society. He escaped, but surviving extreme poverty leaves a psychological scar that wealth cannot erase. Psychologists label this specific trauma as survivor's guilt. When a young athlete breaks the cycle and signs a professional contract, the impoverished neighborhood does not celebrate and walk away. The community circles the conqueror. They impose a silent, crushing tax. The logic is whispered in rundown barbershops and on dimly lit front porches. "We protected you when you had nothing. We starved right alongside you. You carry our neighborhood on your jersey. Now, it is your turn to feed us." The message is clear. Success belongs to the collective. The athlete absorbs this message. He looks back at the men he grew up with. He sees them still walking the same dirt roads. He sees them wearing the same frayed shoes. The guilt sets in. He feels an overwhelming obligation to pull everyone up the ladder with him. If he refuses, the neighborhood deploys the most devastating weapon available, the label of a traitor. They accuse him of adopting corporate arrogance and forgetting his roots. They claim he abandoned his blood the second the check cleared. For a man who relied exclusively on his tribal community for basic survival during childhood, community exile feels identical to a physical execution. Sapp internalized this exact fear. He decided to pay the tax. He opened his checkbook. He began funding the lives of his extended network. He purchased vehicles. He paid rent for distant cousins. He covered astronomical dinner tabs. He believed that his violent physical labor on Sunday afternoons could magically float the local economy of his hometown. He believed that saying yes was the only acceptable response to any request. He equated financial generosity with personal safety. If he kept paying, they would keep loving him. "I got us" becomes the daily mantra. That single phrase inevitably triggers the collapse. One man can routinely tackle a 300-pound offensive lineman. One man can dominate an entire defensive scheme. But one man's fragile spine cannot support the gravitational weight of 20 able-bodied adults who refuse to seek employment. The young giant willingly traded his bruised ribs and torn ligaments for their temporary comfort. The dirt roads of Plymouth never actually let him leave. They simply extended their geographical reach. The trap adapted. The neighborhood pulled the cash directly from his tailored pockets while he bled on the professional turf, steppe, inside a premium Miami nightclub at 2 in the morning. The deep bass vibrates through the oak floorboards. Neon strobes slice through thick cigar smoke. At the precise center of the venue sits the most exclusive VIP table, cordoned off by velvet ropes and towering security guards. Warren Sapp occupies the center seat. He is not alone. Surrounding him are 15 able-bodied men. Some are distant relatives. Some are childhood friends from Plymouth. Some are strangers who simply walked into his orbit and never left. They wear tailored suits financed by his labor. They hold crystal glasses filled with expensive, imported champagne. Waitresses carry burning sparklers through the dense crowd, delivering $5,000 bottles of liquor directly to their waiting hands. The celebration never stops. His guests consume the alcohol while Sapp watches. When the waiter returns with the leather billfold, nobody reaches for their wallets. The 15 men look at the exhausted giant in the middle. The unspoken rule governs the table. It has governed the table since the day he signed his rookie contract. Put it on Sapp's tab. He can afford it. The credit card slides into the machine. A signature secures the payment. The party continues. This environment represents the modern athlete's entourage. Sociologists label it a cultural phenomenon. Watching it operate inside the nightclub reveals a far darker reality. The entourage functions as a specialized, highly organized consumer syndicate. They produce no goods. They generate no wealth. They rely exclusively upon the athletic output of their benevolent provider to maintain their position at the VIP table. These men master the art of psychological manipulation. They weaponize loyalty. They physically surround Sapp in all public venues, acting as an intimidating, impenetrable human shield. They laugh the loudest at his jokes. They verbally inflate his athletic ego after every defensive sack. They construct a dense, intoxicating echo chamber of validation. They isolate him from the outside world, convincing the giant that only the entourage can provide genuine protection. "You're the king, man." They whisper over the music. "We got your back, always." In exchange for this manufactured praise, they demand full access to his checkbook. The financial burn rate defies mathematics. Purchasing bottles at the club only constitutes the opening act. The demands quickly escalate into structural daylight robbery. They ask for custom luxury vehicles. They request sprawling penthouse apartments in prime real estate districts. They routinely demand first-class airline tickets for cross-country vacations they cannot afford on their own. When the entourage decides to travel, the logistical operation mimics an inefficient royal procession. The host pays for the suites, the gourmet food, the private transportation, and any collateral damage left behind. Swipe. Sign. Approve. The rhythm of continuous spending becomes an addiction. If Sapp hesitates to sign the receipt, the syndicate deploys its emotional defense mechanism. The validation instantly sours into toxic guilt. A cousin loudly reminds him of a small favor from 15 years ago. A friend points out how the corporate world exploits black athletes, insisting that true loyalty only exists within their tight-knit group. They weaponize his childhood trauma. He buys the illusion. He pays the ransom. The cruelty of the arrangement plays out every Sunday afternoon. The syndicate sits comfortably in private stadium boxes. They eat catered food. They watch the host endure violent, high-speed collisions on the gridiron. They witness the brutal impact of a 300-pound offensive lineman crashing into Sapp's vulnerable knees. They see him limp off the field on Monday mornings, absorbing the agonizing physical punishment required to earn his guaranteed salary. Yet, their consumption behaviors never pause to consider the toll. They possess no empathy for the torn cartilage and the chronic pain. They cheer for his tackles only because those statistics guarantee the continuation of their extravagant lifestyle. They view the athlete purely as an inexhaustible natural resource, a mine waiting to be stripped. They strip him cleanly. The larger his contracts grew, the faster the surrounding population multiplied. Long-lost relatives materialized out of thin air to claim their rightful portion of the ongoing harvest. The syndicate constantly adjusted its operational numbers to ensure his excess yield never successfully accumulated into long-term savings or investments. The surplus vanished the second the direct deposit cleared the bank. They engineered a perpetual deficit. They functioned as apex predators, hiding behind the mask of brotherhood. The entourage bypasses the security alarms, walks straight through the front door, and demands daily sustenance out of forced moral obligation. They leave the host hollowed out, defending his shrinking accounts with a compliant smile. The swarm drinks the champagne. The host absorbs the concussion. The music stops abruptly. For nearly a decade, the party masked the structural damage, but a financial ecosystem constructed upon one man's physical health operates on a fragile timeline. When Warren Sapp retired from professional football, the multi-million-dollar direct deposits ceased. The inflow of compensation ended. The outflow of consumption accelerated. His marriage collapsed under the strain. A contentious divorce forced the private ledgers into the harsh light of public scrutiny. The courts demanded accountability. The credit cards froze. In the wild, dependents sense the shifting environment long before the host acknowledges his own demise. As Sapp's financial liquidity evaporated, the entourage reacted with chilling precision. The young men who previously occupied his VIP sections scattered into the night. The distant relatives who continuously demanded luxury transportation vanished from his geographical orbit. They packed their expensive belongings without offering a single word of gratitude or concern. They detached themselves from the drying well and seamlessly migrated to their next target. Sapp found himself structurally isolated within the hollowed-out carcass of his own mansion. The silence inside a sprawling residence feels suffocating when the applause fades. It leaves a man alone with his ghosts during the court-ordered liquidation process. Forensic accountants and bankruptcy trustees breached the interior of his vast Florida home. They arrived with clipboards and formal eviction notices to catalog luxury goods to strip and sell. They expected to find expansive art collections, custom jewelry hidden in safes, or rare automobiles parked in the sprawling garages. They stumbled upon a crime scene of the mind. Investigators walked into multiple rooms visibly choked by excess cardboard. They documented 240 pairs of premium Air Jordan sneakers. The footwear occupied significant physical space, stacked against the walls and stretching dangerously close to the ceiling. The vast majority of these items remained hermetically sealed inside their original manufacturing packaging, hidden from human feet. Some boxes sat wrapped tightly in plastic shrink wrap to preserve the fresh condition of the leather. Evaluating this accumulation as a fashion choice ignores the psychological mechanics of trauma. This specific phenomenon belongs in psychiatric literature. It is classified as panic hoarding. A child raised in acute generational poverty develops a hyper-vigilant nervous system. The brain learns that deprivation acts as the default state of human existence. The child internalizes the agonizing feeling of an empty stomach during the winter months. He internalizes the burning shame of wearing frayed, poorly laced shoes pulled from local charity bins while peers mock him on the playground. This specific brand of public shame etches permanent, irreversible grooves into the delicate cerebral cortex. The nervous system becomes hardwired for survival. When that child physically outgrows his impoverished environment and acquires an excess of resources, the underlying neurological fear remains fully operational. The phantom sensation of extreme poverty constantly stalks him. It peers over his shoulder during every waking hour. He believes a single misstep will send him tumbling back into the dirt. Sapp utilized the cardboard boxes as defensive barricades. He purchased the inventory in frantic, irrational bursts of retail therapy. When the anxiety of going broke crept into his mind at night, he drove to the mall the next morning. He handed over his credit card. He returned home carrying towering stacks of brand new Nike boxes. He piled them against the walls of his empty living room. He built a literal fortress utilizing consumer goods. Each sealed box represented a desperate, subconscious attempt to medically numb the lingering trauma of his youth. The towering cardboard stacks provided a tangible visual confirmation of his perceived safety. If he could reach out and touch 200 physical pairs of premium leather goods, the phantom of childhood starvation could not breach his perimeter. He barricaded his mental health behind luxury garments. He used inanimate objects to silence a very real psychological demon. "I have something. They can't take this from me," the inner voice rationalized. The coping mechanism proved fatal. Purchasing inanimate objects cannot repair a fractured nervous system. The psychological requirement for safety expanded infinitely. The more resources he converted into cardboard boxes, the more hollow he felt inside his own home. The hoarding mechanism mutated into a compulsive daily reflex. He bought shoes he mathematically could not wear. This reflex accelerated his depletion. While the entourage drained his reserves from the outside, his own panic hoarding drained his reserves from the inside. He fought a multi-front war against his exploiting community and his own memory. The daily burn rate shattered basic arithmetic. He financed luxury vehicles for cousins who secretly despised him. He funded exorbitant nightlife experiences for men who abandoned him the second the money dried up. He converted the residual value of his spine into shoeboxes that sat gathering dust in dark, silent closets. He paid the highest physical price for the lowest emotional return. A trauma victim operates under inverted logic. Sensing the impending catastrophic collapse of his formal credit limits, Sapp accelerated his hoarding behavior. He frantically converted his dwindling capacity into more inanimate inventory, stockpiling goods with negligible resale value. He attempted to build the cardboard wall higher, hoping its physical mass would block out the encroaching legal and social reality of his impending financial ruin. The panic induced a retail feeding frenzy. He shopped as the ship sank. The speed of his purchasing desperately raced against the expanding void inside his chest. Inevitably, the physical reality of mathematics overcame the psychological coping mechanisms. The judicial system seized the remaining structural holdings. The court forcibly liquidated his defensive cardboard barricades. Returned to the echo inside the federal auction house, the bankruptcy liquidators finalized the paperwork. They successfully auctioned the seized inventory for fractions of its original retail cost. Bargain hunters carried the cardboard boxes out the front doors, dismantling the giant's psychological fortress piece by piece in front of media cameras. The state officially stripped him of his worldly possessions and marched him onto the public stage as a cautionary tale. How does society officially record the elimination of Warren Sapp? Mainstream sports broadcasting adheres to a highly standardized, predictable script. Analysts look at the emptied checking accounts and the chaotic divorce filings. They shake their heads at the sheer volume of footwear. They label him a towering physical specimen who possessed elite defensive instincts but lacked basic intellectual capacity. They portray the collapse as a simple, easily avoidable domestic miscalculation born out of greed. They conclude that he chose luxury over logic. This assessment acts as a convenient fiction. It shields the public from acknowledging the brutal mechanics of extreme social mobility. Clumsiness fails to explain the rapid evaporation of his wealth. He suffered from a coordinated extraction. He operated as a solitary provider, supporting an artificially inflated population of adult dependents. He provided the sole gravitational pull, holding a dozen idle lives in orbit. To break the cycle of generational poverty, Sapp climbed to the pinnacle of professional athletics. His reward for this extraordinary survival feat was an immediate, institutionalized extortion. The neighborhood that loudly cheered his triumphant departure instantly formulated a mandatory physical tax upon his inevitable return. They demanded a continuous share of the harvest, simply because they shared his zip code. His failure stems from a refusal to recognize the leeches attached to his own skin. He believed he was nurturing a vibrant, loyal community. He assumed his weekly sacrifices on the football field would effectively purchase genuine love off the field. He attempted to barter his compressed spine for long-term interpersonal security. He equated providing resources with receiving human affection. The entourage possessed no interest in emotional bartering. They desired only raw sustenance. When the legal court system publicly shattered his defensive barriers and froze his checking accounts, the true nature of his inner circle emerged without disguise. The cousins and childhood friends who enthusiastically drank the imported alcohol quietly packed their bags. They abandoned the crippled host the very second the money flow definitively reversed. The most devastating irony lies within the cardboard boxes. The public stared at those endless stacks of premium footwear and laughed hysterically at his perceived vanity. They missed the structural tragedy taking place. Those shoes functioned as the deteriorating psychological armor of a traumatized child. The adult giant bought the shoes in a vain attempt to silence the starving boy still living inside his exhausted nervous system. He built a cardboard wall to hide from a ghost. He attempted to purchase a permanent cure for poverty. The cure did not exist within the retail market. The National Football League moved forward. The broadcasting networks aired new games. Public attention shifted toward the next incoming draft class of young, impoverished athletes. As a new generation of players signed their introductory contracts, the cycle reset itself. The dependents who previously occupied Sapp's VIP sections successfully integrated themselves into new social circles. They relocated across the country. They seamlessly attached themselves to the arteries of younger, newly drafted stars stepping onto the professional stage. They resumed their relentless consumption patterns without a single ounce of remorse or hesitation. The host succumbed. The leeches survived the collapse flawlessly. They always survive.